Good morning, everyone. I've got 9 o'clock sharp, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jim Cowan. I'm the Director of Course Rating and Handicapping for the NCGA on the NCGA staff, headquartered out of Poppy Hills. Joining me is Martin Fuentes, Assistant Director of Handicapping. We're going to be making a presentation on the World Handicap System. I'm going to do that probably about an hour and 45 minutes, and then Martin is going to be monitoring questions that you submit so that we can make this a little bit of a dialogue. If this group is the same as yesterday's, 15 minutes into it, there's going to be a question posed about something that we're going to cover 15 minutes later. We're just going to let that question go. But he's going to be monitoring them, and then we're going to be reversing roles. He is going to be making a presentation on the new GIN administrative portal, and I will be trying to monitor the questions that are presented at that time. We are recording this, so if you have colleagues at your club who are unable to make it in this morning that you think would benefit from listening to this, you can let them know that it's going to be available on our website. They can just on demand gain access to it and listen to the commentary and view the slides and the videos. Also want to point out that tomorrow there'll be a webinar on the subject of Member Planet and our Club Ambassador program. Member Planet is the platform that we're asking you to perform your roster moves on. That includes adds to your roster, deletions to your roster. It does much more than that. It's a full member management platform with all sorts of communication vehicles, but pertaining to GIN and everything, it does sync with GIN. That is how you perform your roster adds, deletes, etc. You're going to find during Martin's presentation that we're using the GIN portal for a lot of score transactions, including edits and deletes, rapid score entry. We're going to use the admin portal for running various reports. And if you ever need to perform a deep dive on a golfer, someone who appears in the winner's circle a little bit too much, the admin portal would have some resources available to you to perform an analysis on an individual golfer. In starting out, I got to tell you, this is not how we would have drawn things up. And when I say this, I mean a convergence of the World Handicap System and the new GIN platforms and the rollout of Member Planet. But due to circumstances outside our control, this is the hand that we've been dealt. We've been joking at our live seminars that, years from now we'll laugh about that winter of 2020 and some of the struggles and everything coming together at once. But at least for our department, it's not much of a laughing matter right now. I'm going to suggest to you, because a lot of people have a natural aversion to change, I'm going to suggest that you try to focus on the similarities between the New World Handicap System and the existing USGA Handicap System, rather than the dissimilarities. If I had to put a number on it, I would say about 85% of the World Handicap System is coming directly or indirectly from the USGA system, and the remaining 15% are features that other worldwide handicap systems have used successfully for decades upon decades. Just to give you a little example of some of the similarities, one, no change to course ratings and slope ratings here in the U.S. So the ratings that you have will carry over, they're fine. You contrast that with much of the world that has never seen a slope rating in their life. In Scotland, for example, if you're a 20, you're 20 everywhere you go. Your handicap doesn't go up at a Carnoustie or a Troon. It doesn't come down at a very simple golf course. We went through this in the mid to late 80s. They're going to get a crash course on the slope system right away. So we're fortunate there that we don't have to worry about any change there. You're going to continue to post the same scores you always have. Match play, stroke play, individual play, partnership play, team play. No change to your score posting habits in terms of these scores that you submit. Again, we contrast that with some other countries. This is going to be a huge departure from what they've been doing. At one point at one of the international meetings, I asked a colleague from the RNA how many rounds of golf he thought he played the previous year, and he said, oh, about 75. I said, how many of those do you actually post for handicap purposes? He said 4. Under their system, just a handful of scores were posted per year. They would identify the dates of those rounds weeks or months in advance, so all the golfers would know this. But that's how their system worked. And this is an oversimplification of what they would do, but if you were preparing to play for one of these rounds, it's going to count towards your handicap. If you were a 15.0, there's an expectation that your score is going to fall in a certain range at that golf course. And I'm just going to make up some numbers, but maybe it'd be from an 85 to a 95. And if you happen to score within that range that day, congratulations, you get to keep your 15.0. If you played a little bit better, you might come down fractionally. If you played worse than that scoring range, a little bit worse or a lot worse, you got to go up 1/10 of a stroke. So if you do the math in your head, you're only posting 4 to 5 scores per year, and you can only go up 1/10 of a stroke at a time. It was not a very responsive system, certainly had problems in terms of golfers as they're aging. So for them, it's a whole new world of liberalizing, opening up score posting, posting much more scores than they ever have. For us, no issues. The building blocks of handicaps, handicap differentials, have not changed one bit. So if you perform an examination of your scoring record on New Year's Eve, and you see the date, the score, the course ratings, and at the far right, the differential awarded for that round, and then you compare that number with mid-January, you take another look, you'll see the number has not changed one bit. So the building blocks remain the same. Contrast that with another number of countries that have never seen a handicap differential, have no idea what it means. Your scoring record is going to remain the same. 20 scores, new score comes in, old score falls off, and we're still going to use an average-based system, meaning we're going to lock in on an upper percentage of your scores in which to perform the handicap calculations, so no change there. And one slight change, but same concept, the current USGA system does not want an uncharacteristically bad hole, a blow-up hole, to have a huge impact on the score you post, the differential you're awarded, the handicap you're issued. We call that equitable stroke control. Well, same concept under the World Handicap System. We're going to call it something different. It's maximum hole score, it's net double bogey, but same concept. We're trying to minimize the impact of an uncharacteristically bad hole. So same overall view, same overall concept, just a slightly different delivery. So again, I hope you're going to come away from this feeling pretty confident, telling yourself, okay, well, I recognize the majority of this, and that'll hopefully prepare you for questions that your membership might have about the system. So let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. This is the current landscape that we see right now. 6 primary international handicap systems. The dominant one, the USGA handicap system there in red. Argentina has their own system, as does South Africa, Australia, Europe, and basically the RNA. And here's where we'll be moving to soon. Now, the entire world is not going to flip the switch on January 1st. If you think about it, the Southern Hemisphere, January 1st is nearly the start of summer. And the last thing they want to do is cross over at the peak of their score posting season. So they're going to wait until their off season, our summer, until most of those Southern Hemisphere countries move over. And then there's a couple of little holdouts. England has not, at least on the men's side, has not finished rating all their courses. They still have 200 to 300 to go. They're going to try to get all those done this year, so they're not coming on until later. But essentially, this is where we're moving. It's also important to note that there are a few discretionary items. So it's not going to be 100% identical system everywhere in the world. The big picture items, yes, in terms of the computation, but to give you an example, the treatment of 9-hole scores, we're going to continue to treat them just as we always have. If you played 9 today and 9 next week, those 2 9-hole scores will be combined to form an 18-hole score, and then it'll be treated just like any other 18-hole score. Well, there are some countries that'd like to see immediate impact by that posting. And so they're going to figure out a way to scale up that score to an 18-hole equivalent. They're not just going to double that score, but they're going to do that so it has an immediate impact, and you may get a new handicap the following morning based upon your posting of a 9-hole score. We chose not to. So that's just an example of a couple of the slight variations. where a country has an option of going down one path or the other for a couple of areas. So all 6 of these authorities were offered a seat at the table of the international committee that was formed 4 years ago, where they would have representation. Some of these systems were offered more seats than the other. The RNA and the USGA are now considered the governing body of handicapping worldwide, just as they are for the rules of golf, just as they are for equipment standards and amateur status. So, and they're also bankrolling the rollout and the production of this system. So they are offered additional seats, and the USGA in particular offered up a few spots to state and regional associations across the country to fill out their delegation, and that's how the NCGA got a seat at this international table as well. So 4 years later, 10 multi-day meetings, several conference calls, several homework assignments, we're just about ready to jump in. Here's a slide again indicating that this is now a governance issue for the RNA and the USGA. And in terms of the hierarchy, they stand at the top, followed by national associations. Then there's allied golf associations like the NCGA. There's you, the golf club, and specifically the handicap committee. And then there's the player. And each level of this hierarchy has different responsibilities placed upon them. Some of the most notable responsibilities placed on the NCGA, for example, are the measuring and rating of your golf courses, the adjudication or determination of the par on all the holes. When we get to the golf club level, you're responsible for overseeing the administration of the handicaps for your members, specifically the posting of scores by your memberships, confirming that they are doing what they're supposed to in terms of posting. You're responsible for dispensing penalty actions when somebody isn't abiding by the spirit of the system, etc. We work our way to the player. 2 of the main responsibilities they have: 1, to try their hardest on every hole to score the best they can, and 2, to post all of their scores. Now there's going to be a new manual. It's not going to be called a manual. It's actually the rules of handicapping now. It starts off with some definitions, then there are 7 rules and a number of appendices, much thinner than the old manual. We have been informed that the USGA is going to ship us some the week of January 6th. Sure, it'll take a few days to arrive here. And then we in turn are going to send out 2 copies per club to you. For green grass clubs, we're also going to throw in a poster or 2 that hopefully you can find a bulletin board to post within your club that highlights some of the major changes to the system. So we'll be getting those out to you probably mid-January-ish. We do have the manual online on our website right now. We've actually created a specific web page devoted to the World Handicap System. So if you go to ncga.org to the handicapping area, pull down that tab, you'll see a page labeled World Handicap System and includes some articles, frequently asked questions, a number of videos, some of which you're going to see today, and you'll see that the manual's there. So if you're dying to read this document from cover to cover, and who wouldn't be, you can access that right now. This might be of particular interest when it comes to handicap allowances. There are a number of changes recommended. So if you have some tournaments in early January, some team formats and whatever, you're going to want to go to that online manual to see the newest recommendations for those various formats. So as I mentioned, we got our hands on a number of videos that have been produced either by the committee that's in the World Handicap System Committee and or the USGA. We have a bank of them on our website, short, to the point, some of them called snackable videos that are a minute or less. So you'll see some of them today. Again, just know that these are available on this special web page. If you have some of your playing buddies that are a little confused, for example, on how net double bogey works, there's a 60-second video on the subject, so you can refer them to that. But here's a nice little introductory video regarding the World Handicap System.
The World Handicap System is designed to welcome all players to the sport, regardless of age, gender, ability, or nationality, no matter what sort of golf they like to play or how much time they have. All players are encouraged to get a handicap index, giving them a sense of their golfing ability, allowing them to track their performance, and providing a score to aim for, no matter where they're playing or how well they play. It's a myth that you must be good to have a handicap. The whole purpose of the World Handicap System is to allow for greater enjoyment whether playing for competitive reasons or having fun. With a maximum handicap index of 54, the World Handicap System is accessible and inclusive, meeting the needs of players new to the game, as well as those that have played for a long time. To obtain a first handicap index, a player needs to complete a minimum number of holes in an authorised format of play and submit scores in accordance with the rules of handicapping. The system is flexible. Players may submit 18-hole or 9-hole scores if more appealing, or any combination of the two. For players with limited time, the rules of handicapping help support a good pace of play. Where the format allows, players are encouraged to pick up when they have reached their maximum hole score or when they are out of a hole in a team or match play format. With scores submitted promptly after each round, a player's handicap index can be updated ready for the next day or soon after, giving them instant feedback on their progress. There is a balance to be drawn between inclusiveness and the safeguards required to ensure your handicap index truly reflects your golfing ability. A poor run of form won't increase your handicap index too quickly, while rapidly improving ability is recognised by applying additional reductions to your index for exceptional scores. Your score must either be verified by a marker or reviewed by peers. If you fail to submit a score when required, a penalty score may be applied to your scoring record. Golf clubs and handicap committees play a major role in welcoming new players to the sport and managing their handicaps. They may offer separate competitions for different handicap ranges or separate scratch and handicap prizes, allowing players of all abilities to enjoy the thrill of competition. At least once a year, handicap committees will review players' handicaps to ensure they continue to reflect their ability. These measures combine to maintain the integrity of the game while promising a system that works for every player, whether competing for a trophy or playing their first round.
So again, a nice overview there. That's probably the longest video that's in the bank. A lot of familiar territory there, a lot of functionality, very similar to what we're doing now. The purpose of the handicap system, though, has not changed. It's to try to make the game of golf more enjoyable by enabling players of different abilities to compete against each other. We want to make it easier for a new golfer to obtain one. We want to make the game a little bit more welcoming. It's a tough game if you're a brand new golfer to break in. And they want you to be able to use this handicap index anywhere in the world. Now, there's some new terms that are going to be thrown at us for the World Handicap System that we're going to have to get used to. So I'm going to review those somewhat quickly. The first is low handicap index. That's the lowest handicap that you've achieved within the past 12 months. And what that really means is that the system is going to retain a memory. What we're going to find out is that the system is only going to let you stray so far above that low index mark of the past 12 months. So once you get a few strokes above your handicap, it may put the brakes on, and it's only going to let you get so far above that low mark that you've established. Now, early on, we did not try to go back and compute what your handicap would have been all throughout 2019 under the math of the World Handicap System. So the first handicap that you're issued under the World Handicap System will be January 6th, and that's going to be your low of the year. So we're all going to get a little bit of a reprieve regarding this memory and how it's going to impact the soft and hard cap, because again, we did not try to go back and figure what would your World Handicap have been in February 2019, March, etc. I mentioned the soft and hard cap. That ties into the low handicap index. The system's going to let your handicap go down as much as necessary. There's no limitation on how far you can go down, but upwards is a different story. Once you reach a point where you're 3.0 strokes above your low index of the past year, it's going to start to apply the brakes. It's going to suppress the rate at which your handicap index goes up. And then there's a hard cap at 5 strokes. It's flat out not going to let you get more than 5 strokes above your low mark of the past 12 months. Now, certainly if there are exceptional circumstances, a golfer had their knee replaced, hip replaced, coming back from an illness, the handicap committee can intervene. But generally speaking, this is how it's going to work in terms of the caps. It's also our first indication that you may need to intervene on some other occasions. Throughout the year, we get notified, you get notified a lot about somebody who posted a score in error. They shot a 95, they accidentally posted it as a 65. Sometimes someone tries to post a 9-hole score to an 18-hole rating and then are in for a shock when their next handicap is issued. So since we do have a concept of a low handicap index and we do have these caps in place, if someone made a catastrophic error like that, you can imagine how much their handicap will drop the next day. You have the ability to go in and reset the low handicap so that this error in posting does not come back to haunt the player down the road. So when Martin shows you the GIN administrative portal, he's going to show you a button that allows you to reset this low handicap index as necessary if someone made a huge error in a score posting. And he's also going to show you a button where you can recalculate that handicap on the spot after you've performed that score edit. Playing conditions calculation, for the rest of this presentation, I'm just going to refer to it as the PCC. I think this has really caught the imagination of Americans. It's a procedure that's going to evaluate all the scores posted that day at that golf course to try to determine whether something was going on that made the course play significantly much more difficult or much less difficult than normal. So again, it's an automated part of the system. It doesn't require any intervention on the part of anyone at the golf club. Nobody's going to have to record the weather each day and the wind speed each day, but it's an examination of scores that occurs at midnight our time to see if something was going on that tipped the balance one way or the other, much more difficult than average or much easier than average. And if so, there'll be an adjustment performed on your handicap differential. Exceptional score reduction. Well, we've lost the T-score reduction process. In fact, there's no longer anything called a T-score. It's now going to be called a C-score for competition scores. But the rest of the world just did not have an appetite for a tournament score reduction process. So instead, we have an exceptional score reduction process, meaning that for any round of golf whatsoever, whether home, away, combined nines, or a competition score, if a golfer scores at least 7 strokes below their handicap, an automatic 1-stroke reduction will kick in. If they score more than 10 strokes below their handicap, an automatic 2-stroke reduction will kick in. So we'll be reviewing this in much greater detail. Now, I have not given up the fight on this subject. I'm thinking that as some of these countries are opening up score posting, where they're posting many more scores than they have in the past, they might come around to the idea that, hey, maybe there should be some additional weighting applied to competition scores. So I have not given up, and I'm still going to suggest that people identify significant tournaments within their clubs as C-scores, because if you ever need to perform a deep dive on a golfer, again, someone who's appearing in the winner's circle too often, you want to be able to sort the scores. You want to be able to identify those significant competitions so you can perform a side-by-side view. You know, here's how you play when it's a competition. Here's how you play when it's not a competition, where you can arrive at some conclusions about what the proper resting place of their handicap would be. And if you don't apply that C, you're not going to be able to separate these scores the way that you want to perform such analysis. Net double bogey, well, that's our new equitable stroke control. A lot of people are nervous about this. How am I ever going to compute that? I think some of it is just the word net that's implied. Normally when we think of net, we think of something being subtracted from a gross score, and that's not going to be the case here. The USGA likes to describe it as par plus 2 strokes plus any handicap strokes the golfer is entitled to on that hole, based upon the stroke hole rankings, which we now refer to as stroke index. I prefer to just call it what it is. It's a gross double bogey plus any handicap strokes you're entitled to on that hole. So again, we'll go over this in much greater detail, but whenever you hear net double bogey, think in effect equitable stroke control. And lastly, net par. This is just a different term for something we've been doing for years and years. If you were to tee it up today, play 16 holes, it got dark, you were not able to play holes 17, 18. Under the current USGA system, you can still post a score. You would fill in the blank for those unplayed holes with a par plus any handicap strokes you're entitled to. Under the World Handicap system, exact same procedure, except that we refer to that par plus number as a net par. So I'm not going to dwell on the course rating system a lot because, again, no change for us, big change for some other countries. But just a reminder, the course rating is the evaluation of the difficulty of that course, that set of tees for a scratch golfer, a golfer with a 0 handicap. And we also come up with a bogey rating. On the men's side, a bogey golfer is around a 20 handicapper. On the women's side, about a 24 handicapper. So when we rate a course, we literally look at each hole, each shot through the eyes of both these golfers and how the different obstacles on the hole present themselves for both players, to both players. So in the end, we come up with a scratch rating, which we call the course rating, and a bogey rating. And based upon the size of the gap between the two, a slope rating is issued. The wider the gap, the higher the slope. So on a very short, wide open, flat course where you can hit an errant shot and still hit a recovery shot towards the green, we would find that the scoring between a scratch golfer and a bogey golfer, the gap between the two would not be especially wide. You contrast that with a very long, punishing golf course with really tough fairway bunkers, with fast sloping greens. The bogey golfer's game is simply not as well equipped to handle that sort of difficult golf course. So we would see an exceptionally wide gap between the scratch rating, the course rating, and the bogey rating, and a high slope would be issued in that case. And here's a quick video on the subject.
No two golf courses play the same. A score of 87 on a difficult course might be a better performance than a score of 85 on an easy one. It's not just courses that differ. Each player will perform differently, even on the same course. The scratch player, a golfer with a 0 handicap index, will have a different experience from the bogey player, a golfer with a handicap index of around 20 to 24. Playing a round of golf on the same course at the same time in normal conditions, the bogey player will find more challenges with distance, accuracy, and dealing with obstacles. Course ratings and slope ratings allow the handicap system to reflect this as part of the conversion of a player's handicap index into a playing handicap, so that golfers of differing abilities can have a fair and enjoyable game. Course ratings reflect the playing difficulty under normal conditions for the scratch player. Slope ratings represent the difference in playing difficulty for all players compared to the scratch player. Being a fundamental part of the handicap system, course ratings are carried out methodically by qualified teams, trained by authorized associations. Ratings are based on normal course and weather conditions, with each hole being evaluated for effective playing length and obstacles. The effective length includes factors such as elevation, roll, wind, and altitude. Obstacles include factors such as trees, fairway width, penalty areas, recoverability from rough, and green size. All these factors are assessed separately for both the scratch and bogey player. Once the evaluation process has been completed, the course rating and slope rating is calculated for each set of tees. When it comes to playing a round of golf, course ratings and slope ratings should normally be available on a lookup chart or through an app, which can be used to determine your handicap and how many strokes you'll receive. In bringing together a course rating system that is already in use in many parts of the world, with a consistent method of calculating handicaps, the World Handicap System provides a handicap index which is truly portable, whoever you are, whatever your ability, and wherever you are playing in the world, enabling you to match your skills against other players of differing abilities and making the game even more enjoyable.
So again, a nice little refresher on course rating there for us. We still have something called a course handicap. That's going to be the number that comes off the charts located at at the golf courses for each set of tees. It's going to be one slight twist though. Instead of just adjusting your handicap index to the slope rating of the tees, we're also going to factor in the difference between the course rating and par into the numbers that appear on the tables. And why are we doing that? Well, this pretty much explains why we're doing this. This is the impact of different ratings and different slopes presently and in the future on a 15.0 handicap index. So if you look at the left, we got 3 widely different sets of tees, green, white, and silver. Big difference in the course ratings and the slope ratings. They all happen to have the same par. But under the 2019 handicap system, if you're a 15.0 and you choose to play these 3 tees, you'd be issued a 17, 17, and 16 handicap from green, white, and silver. And a lot of people look at this and scratch their head. They're going, the silver tees are 700 yards shorter than green. How is it possible that my course handicap is only 1 stroke lower than it would be from those really long green tees? And we have some clubs that have been mystified by this to a point where they've said, no, we're not going to let those seniors play in our tournaments from the silver tees. We're going to make them play the longer tees. They're only forfeiting 1 stroke in handicap. They would run away with all the competitions. That's not quite fair. Well, what they're not recognizing is what that course handicap under the present system really means. All that number, those 17, 17, 16, have been trying to tell you is how many strokes do you need to score above the course rating that day in order to play right to your handicap. So from those green tees that carry a course rating of 72, if your course handicap is 17, it's telling you you need to score an 89 that day to play exactly to your handicap. If you score a little better, that means you outperformed your handicap. From the silver tees, that 16 is telling you you need to score 16 strokes above that course rating of 68 in order to play exactly to your handicap. So in effect, your target score would be an 84. So the expectation of the handicap system has always been that you're going to score vastly different from these sets of tees. And there is a handicap adjustment under the current system that compensates those who are playing the longer tees if they happen to be competing against those playing the shorter tees. Right now, what you do is you calculate the difference in the course ratings and you award those additional strokes to those playing the longer tees, or the shorter tee players forfeit the difference between the course ratings. So we would find under the current system that eventually if someone from green was competing against silver, there would be a 5-stroke difference in handicap. But it's not very evident right from the outset when you just look at the slope tables and you see that 17, 17, 16. Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to factor in the difference between the course rating and par. So if the course rating happens to be higher than par, additional strokes are going to be built into the tables that are going to be awarded to you right at the outset. And if you're playing from a set of tees that carries a course rating lower than par, strokes are going to be subtracted from your course handicap versus the current tables. So where this year we would see a 17, 17, 16 in this example, next year we're going to see a 19, 17, 14. And we hope that light bulbs are going to go off in people's heads and they go, now I understand. Yes, we have no problem with the silver tee players competing in our competitions while the rest of us are playing white or green. We can see that they have given up handicap strokes, that the system recognizes that they don't need as many strokes from those tees. So henceforth, think of your course handicap as the number of strokes you need to play to par. So when all is said and done and you look at your net score that you achieved that round, you'll now be able to compare it with the par of the tees you played as opposed to the course rating to determine how you played in relationship to your handicap. So everything has been standardized apart. And better yet, if the 2 tees that you are utilizing for your competition carry the same par, no additional adjustment must be made. The tables will have done all the heavy lifting for you. They will have performed all the adjustments for you. So in this case, if the green and silver tees, they do carry the same par, the 19 handicap and the 14 handicap, again, all the heavy lifting has been done for you. We don't need to perform a calculation based upon the difference in the course ratings. Now, if the pars are different, and oftentimes they will be, if you have a blue, then a white, then a gold, and a red tee scenario and there's men's ratings issued for all sets of tees, chances are those all aren't par 72, despite what the scorecard might say. Chances are they're par 72 from blue and white, and maybe 71 or 72 from gold, and maybe 60 something from red. We need to call par what it really is, and again, par is the standard for a scratch player. It's not the standard for the caliber of golfers that tend to play those tees. So it can't be, gee, the only men who play those red tees are all in their 70s and their handicaps are over 20 and they can't reach those greens in 2, so that must mean they're a par 5. No, we have to imagine a scratch golfer playing those red tees, and if on that hole it's clearly a 2-shot hole, we've got to call that a par 4, because we're going to find out that par is a much bigger factor within the World Handicap system than it's been within the USGA system. So again, think in terms of the course handicap as the number of strokes you need to play to par that day. All the work has been done for you. We're also introducing something called a playing handicap. Sometimes you get your number off the course handicap table, but that's not the number that appears on the scorecard. Maybe you're playing in a format, a team competition where you're not awarded 100% of your handicap. Maybe you're only awarded 85%. Well, the playing handicap is going to be the number that actually appears on the scorecard. The course handicap, the one that comes off the table, determines your maximum hole score. But for your competition that you're playing that day, the playing handicap represents how many strokes you're going to receive that round for that form of play. So if we had a 15 and we're only playing 85% allowance for this team format that you're playing, and the 13 appears on the scorecard, that's your playing handicap. Under the USGA system, both numbers, even though they might be different, are both called a course handicap, and we felt that that was confusing. So the course handicap is the full handicap that comes off the table. The playing handicap is the number of strokes that you get for that particular format for that particular round of golf. We already saw in the video that a brand new golfer can receive a handicap quicker now. It only takes the posting of 54 holes worth of scores rather than 90 holes worth of scores. So this is going to get someone into the system quicker and achieve a handicap index, which is great. We've also seen that the maximum handicap index is moving to 54.0. Now, I've already received some emails on this saying, oh, this is horrible. This is the worst thing that has ever happened to golf. These people are going to slow down play, just going to make the pace of play so slow, it's ridiculous. As if these people weren't already playing these golf courses. These people are already out there, they just don't carry a handicap at this time. Or if they do, it's kind of a meaningless handicap. So actually, if anything, the pace of play may improve with someone being issued a handicap, because right now, if they don't have one, they're probably just going to keep on going until they hole out. And once they've been issued a handicap, they reach a point where their maximum hole score kicks in, and they may go ahead and pick up. So again, these people are already playing the golf courses. If anything, we may see that pace of play improves because we've raised the maximum limit for men from 36.4 and women from 40.4, both of them to 54. We want to make them feel welcome to the game of golf. Now, we mentioned maximum hole score, net double bogey. Again, the USGA likes to describe it as a par plus 2 strokes plus any handicap strokes you're entitled to. I prefer to look at it as a gross double bogey plus any handicap strokes you're entitled to. We have an example here. All these slides came from the USGA. They constructed them. And wouldn't you know it, they kind of weaned out on this one when they wanted to explain how net double bogey works. They picked a golfer with a course handicap of 18. So pretty simple to figure this one out. They're going to receive a stroke on each hole. So the maximum hole score that they can take in terms of posting the score is a gross double bogey plus any handicap strokes they're entitled to on the hole. They receive 1 stroke per hole. So this golfer's maximum hole score is a gross triple bogey. Anytime they score higher than that, they're going to have to pull it down to a gross triple bogey before they turn around and post that score. So here we have the golfer scored a quad on hole number 17. They're going to be required to reduce it by 1 stroke. So if this was a competition, they have to take 95 for the competition. That's the score that's going to go on the scoreboard. but when that score is returned for handicap purposes, it's going to be entered as a 94 because we had to apply the net double bogey concept to this and reduce that by 1. We're getting a lot of people, we don't play a lot of Stableford points here, so they're not used to a term net double bogey. Again, that use of the word net, I think, is throwing some people off. But again, you'd think it's the end of the world coming. Oh my gosh, this is so complicated. I'm never going to be able to learn how to do it. The current system is so simple. And yes, the current system is simple, but it doesn't work really well. A 10 and a 19 handicapper, if you think about it, are lumped together as if they're the same quality golfer, and they're not. And for years, I've heard complaints about, I don't understand this. How come I can post a quad on a par 3 and yet I can't take a triple bogey on a par 5? That makes no sense. So for years and years, people have been complaining about that. We have the issue with the 10 and 19 being treated the same. This is the best system for doing this. Other countries around the world have been using this methodology for decades, and the USGA mathematicians have been clamoring for it for decades. So this is the better way to go. It's just going to take a little bit of getting used to. So here we have a very short video. And again, if you have some colleagues, some friends that you play with, and they're really hung up on net double bogey, you might reference them to this video.
A handicap index should always reflect your demonstrated ability. But on occasion, even the best golfers have bad days and bad holes. Net double bogey adjustment sets a maximum score on any hole for handicap purposes, ensuring bad holes don't impact your handicap index too severely. Working out your net double bogey score on a hole is simple and calculated as follows. Par of the hole plus 2 strokes plus any handicap strokes the player receives on that hole. Where the format of play allows, you should pick up your ball when you reach this maximum hole score. That keeps your game and the game of everyone else on the course moving along. A bad hole might mean you can no longer win the competition. Thanks to the net double bogey adjustment, you can still submit an acceptable score for handicap purposes.
Okay, these next few slides, to a certain degree, a little bit stroll down memory lane. Many of the procedures, policies that have carried over from the USGA system, including incomplete holes. So you're playing match play and you've been conceded a putt either because you knocked it inches away or your opponent blew up on a hole and you had a 15-foot putt that, you know, even if it took you 3 or 4 to get down, you'd still win the hole. So they just say, pick it up. Right now, what we do is we award ourselves, we fill in the blank by giving ourselves our most likely score. In other words, the score we think we would have achieved the majority of the time had we holed out. Same thing moving forward with the World Handicap System. They tried to offer some clarification with some examples. I don't know if this makes the matters better or worse, but they're saying, you know, inside of 5 feet, just add 1 additional stroke. Well, if you've got a 4-foot 11-inch putt that has 6 inches of left to right break, I really don't have a problem with you awarding yourself a 2-putt from that point in order to fill in the blank. Holes not played, we've already discussed this. We're going to award ourselves a net par, a par plus any handicap strokes we're entitled to on the hole. Score posting has not really changed. Match play, stroke play, individual, team play. Scores on all courses made with a current course rating and slope rating, now all throughout the world, would be acceptable. You must be playing by the rules of golf, and you must be accompanied by at least 1 other golfer. So if you play alone and no one is there to witness it, you cannot post the score. That's been in place for a few years. There are still a few occasions where you don't post. If you tuned into the President's Cup last week, they played a format called foursomes, known as alternate shot. Obviously, with a scramble, you're not holing out your own ball from tee to green, so you can't post under those circumstances. Again, if you're playing alone, you can't. I did receive a question recently from a private club. They said sometimes their people go out and they have a caddy, but that's it. Can they post? And the answer is yes, because someone was able to witness it. It doesn't mean somebody else has to be playing. There are even circumstances where you've been disqualified for the round, perhaps in a competition where we still may be able to post the score. Now, if the breach of the rule was some sort of rule which may have given you an advantage over the field, you cannot post the score. But if it didn't give you an advantage, you would. So I heard last month at Q School, there was a golfer who shot a 65 and oops, forgot to sign their scorecard. That breach of the rule did not give them any sort of advantage, so they would be able to post that score for handicap purposes. Treatment of 9-hole scores, we've already discussed this. They'll continue to be combined for you, and then they will now appear with a letter N, indicating it was 9-hole scores that have been combined as opposed to C. Remember, right now we use C, meaning combined nines, but C is now going to be a competition score. Fewer than 9 holes played, well, if you played at least 7 holes, you can fill in the blank for the 2 unplayed holes with net par. If you played at least 14 of the 18 holes, you can post an 18-hole score using net par to fill in the blanks for the up to 4 holes you didn't play. Time frame for submitting a score. This is very, very important, and it's kind of a change. You know, right now the system encourages you to post as soon as practical. Recognizing that there may be some occasions where you're not able to post immediately. Well, under the World Handicap system, handicaps are going to be updated each evening, and that's going to be midnight our time that the button is pushed to update handicaps. So you have an incentive to post your score the same day you played prior to midnight. We're going to find out that there's a double incentive in that the PCC calculation is going to occur right before the handicap update occurs. So you want to get your score in the same day you played before midnight, so your score is included in the mix when the PCC analysis, this PCC calculation is made. And then you want to get it in because the next morning you're going to receive a new handicap based upon that posting from the prior day. Right now, we see all sorts of things. I certainly see a lot of people who hold all their scores until the 14th and then post them all on the 14th so that the handicap comes out on the 15th, reflects all the golf they've played the prior couple of weeks. Well, that really doesn't work very well because you didn't expose those scores to the review of others, but certainly we see that a lot. Certainly we see people wait a day or 2 days to do so. Again, now there's going to be an incentive to post before midnight of the day you played. Now, 2019 also marked the first year in NCGA history that the number of scores submitted via app exceeded the number of scores that arrived at GIN via the kiosks, the score posting kiosks located at golf courses. So an app is a great way to go as far as all things are concerned. One, you post your score from today before midnight, very, very simple to do. 2, you're playing the next morning. The app will then have access to the newly created handicap index based upon the posting of that score. And 3, you can use that app to determine your course handicap based upon the tees you're about to play at the course you're about to play. So the app is a very good way to go. The kiosk will also have access to the newly minted handicap indexes that come out each morning. So if you're not using the app and you played yesterday and you're going to go play today, go to the kiosk, look up your handicap, see if it's changed from the prior day, and then you can look up what your course handicap would be from the various tees. But again, dual incentive to post same day you played before midnight. I think Martin said we had a question that came in that we're going to take a stab at answering right now.
Yeah, we had a few questions come in, Jim. One was, will the stroke index be updated for each tee rating, slope rating at the course? The stroke index for a player's tee may be different than playing from a different tee.
Well, we're going to talk about stroke index much more later in the program, but the recommendation is that you just create one stroke index per gender from the most commonly played tees, and that those numbers should be good for the rest of the tees. So if the white tees are the most commonly played for men and the red are the most commonly played for women, that's what your analysis should be based upon. That's what the ranking should be based upon. And then you would apply those same rankings on the men's side to blue. The thought is blue tee players probably hit the ball a little further than the white tee players, and proportionately those holes probably play about the same. And those gold tee players, same sort of concept, probably hit it a little shorter than the white tee, and those rankings still should do the trick. So one of the challenges that we have, because we didn't know that this was how they were going to roll this out, we need to collect the stroke hole rankings, the stroke index, for all the courses in Northern California for both genders, so that we can enter them, so that hole-by-hole score posting will be meaningful. That if you apply hole-by-hole, eventually either through the app or the kiosk, that the stroke holes will be known, and it will be known what your maximum hole score would be based upon your course handicap and the ranking of those holes.
So next question, Jim. When will the green grass clubs receive their new course rating, slope rating charts?
Well, we're going to try to get that out in the next couple of weeks. So we're taking one last look at the par assignment. As many of you know, the NCGA assumed responsibility for women's course ratings just last year. For years, that had been performed by the WJNC and the PWGA. And so we want to take a quick look at all those par calculations as well. For the most part, over the years, we have been notifying clubs after a course rating visit. We've been sending a report saying, hey, hole number 4 does not qualify as a par 5 for men from those gold and red tees. Now, golf courses have found it inconvenient to put the different pars down on their scorecard, and I suspect they may continue to do so. They may continue to assume that it's a par 72 from all those tees, when in fact we may find the par 72, 72, 70, and 68 from the blue, white, gold, red. So that is going to be a challenge. But again, par is a bigger factor in the system. It's going to be worked into the course handicap tables. You'll be able to see the par that has been assigned to those tees, since it is a responsibility of the NCGA to determine those pars on those course handicap tables. But we're going to be working frantically the next couple of weeks. We're going to email out some temporary tables or disposable tables that a club can just print out on a sheet of paper. We've seen a prototype of a form of this table that the USGA is producing that we really like, that we can put up to 4 sets of tees on one chart. That really looks professional. So we're going to get these temporary ones out, and then we're going to, once they become available to us, we're going to create these better, more permanent ones. In the long run, though, we'd like to wean everybody off these tables. The numbers are available on the kiosk. It's actually a simpler process. You go up to the kiosk, you put in your number, your handicap comes up, and it'll tell you what your course handicap is from all those tables. Okay, we're going to move on. I know some more questions have come in, but apparently they're on topics that we'll be covering a little bit later. Let's look at the handicap formula itself. The USGA likes to indicate that there are 5 significant changes coming in 2020. The number of minimum scores required to issue a handicap has changed from 5 to 3, 54 holes. The math is a little bit different. We're going to find that your handicap is going to be based on the average of your best 8 of 20. We do have a PCC calculation now. We have an exceptional score reduction that covers all scores, not just competition scores. And we have a soft and hard cap. So let's look at these. We're going to find, again, that someone with as few as 3 scores, 54 holes, can be issued a handicap. That handicap would be based on their 1 best of those 3 differentials. And if they only have 3 scores, we're actually going to pull their handicap down 2 more strokes. If anything, the system wants to err on the low side with someone's handicap, not the high side. If they erred on the high side, well, that could come back and haunt all the people that golfer's competing against. So we want to protect the field. So if anything, again, we're going to err on the low side. And eventually, for all of us, our handicap is going to be based on the low 8 of our 20 most recent. So again, score differentials, most of the math has not changed, but there is an opportunity for a PCC adjustment to be applied at the very end. So you're actually going to see in your scoring record that there is going to be a column devoted to the PCC. We would expect that to be blank the vast majority of the time, because the PCC is very conservative in nature. We don't expect it to be applied a lot. We'll talk about this more. I expect it to occur a lot during the winter months as courses are playing much longer, probably not playing to their ratings, but we certainly hope that it does not appear a lot in the summer. But it's same calculation, except there's the potential for a PCC adjustment to add or subtract from the from the difference between the score and the course rating and the slope adjustment. So just a little refresher course on differentials. It is your lowest differentials that are going to be selected for the math for the 8 out of 20, not the lowest score. So in this example, the 97 is actually the highest score, but it generated the lowest differential. Why? Because the golfer was playing a monster golf course rating 73, 8, 140. And ironically here, the lowest score that was submitted, the 90, generated the highest differential because that was played at pretty much a pussycat golf course, a rating of 66.1 and a slope of 105. So it's not the low scores that go into the calculation, it's the lowest differentials. Again, the math is changing now. It's best 8 of 20. Right now, your handicap is based on 96% of your best 10 of 20. We're moving to 100% of your best 8 of 20. 8 is thought to be slightly more responsive to a really good score, slightly less responsive to a poor score. Many countries across the world use 8 out of 20 now, and that's the direction that we chose to make. For the vast majority of golfers, the difference between 96% of the best 10 of 20 and 100% of the best 8 of 20 is fractional. A lot of it depends on the consistency of your scores, and really it's going to come down to the quality of your 9th and 10th best differential. Right now, they are used under the USGA handicap system. Moving forward, they won't. So for most of us, we're hardly going to see any change in our handicap index as we cross over. Here, the USGA has generated a scoring record, identical scoring record left and right, and trying to show how the math is going to be applied. Not a very realistic record, though, because the difference between the best differential and the 10th best differential is very, very small in this example. The low differential is 12.6, and the 10th best differential is 14.4. I know of very few golfers who are that consistent. So again, rest assured, for most of us, we're hardly going to see any change, especially if our scores are fairly consistent. The 9th and 10th best differential are not too far removed from our best few. For those whose scores are a little bit more hot and cold, they may see a little larger change as we cross over in January. So here's a short video on the handicap formula.
Every golfer is different. Every golf course is different. Every day is different. The aim of the World Handicap System is to take all these differences and produce a single measure of a player's golfing ability. A handicap index reflecting the score a player can achieve when playing well. To do that, it must start with a handicap calculation which balances responsiveness and stability, consistency and flexibility. At the core of the handicap calculation is your score, demonstrating how well you played your round relative to the course's difficulty, as determined by its course rating and slope rating, and any conditions that might have made the course harder or easier to play on the day. A record of your scores is maintained, and your handicap index is based on an average of the best 8 of your last 20 scores. Because your worst scores are discarded, your handicap index reflects the score you're likely to achieve on your better days. The more scores you can submit, the more accurately your handicap index will reflect your golfing ability. While any player can have a bad day or a run of poor form, form is temporary. That's why the handicap calculation does more than just look at your most recent best scores. It retains a memory of your lowest handicap index during the past 12 months and provides mechanisms to ensure bad days don't cause your current handicap index to increase too quickly from that low index. Under normal circumstances, your handicap index should never increase more than 5 strokes above your low handicap index over a rolling 12-month period. Players have great days too. Juniors and beginners in particular can improve dramatically over a short period of time. The handicap calculation can identify this, applying additional reductions to a handicap index when a player achieves a score of 7 strokes or more below their current handicap index. A calculation won't always detect a real change in a player's ability. For that reason, each golf club's handicap committee has the tools and can adjust a player's handicap index to better reflect their current ability. All these elements come together as your handicap index is revised promptly, ready for the next day or soon after. The World Handicap System delivers a handicap index to all players that is calculated in a consistent way across the globe. It allows players everywhere to continue to enjoy the game that they love, wherever they play and whoever they're playing with or against.
Okay, well, let's look at this playing conditions calculation, the PCC. If adverse weather conditions or abnormal course setup somehow tip the balance of the scores or skew the scores extremely high or extremely low, the PCC will kick in. It's very simple. It's very conservative in nature. Again, it's automated and nobody has to take any action. It's going to occur at midnight just before handicaps are updated. If there is an adjustment, it's going to show up as an integer, a -1, a +1, a +2, or a +3. But let's look at how it works. It's only performed once a day. We've had some people say, well, at our course, it's very calm in the morning and then blows like crazy in the afternoon. Well, we're only going to perform one evaluation. In order to perform two, you would also have to record when you enter your score, what time you teed off, what time you completed, and we're just not at that point right now. It's going to be based on all scores returned by both genders that day for 9-hole increments or 18-hole increments. Anyone with a 36.0 or below, those scores are going to be accepted and part of the analysis. And basically, the handicap system, when you post a score, it knows what your handicap is. And so it has an expectation that your score is going to fall between a certain range. So again, this is an oversimplification, but if your handicap is 20 and you're playing a set of tees with a slope rating of 125, in its mind, the system might be saying, well, we would expect your score to fall between a 90 and 100. And for a 10, they might say between an 80 and a 90 or whatever. And basically, it's going to analyze all the scores, and it's going to say how many people performed within this expected range, how many scored higher than the expected range, how many scored lower than the expected range. And if the scores come in skewed one way or the other, much, much higher, more people scored much higher than expected, or a huge number of people scored much lower, then the PCC will kick in. So all this comes back to the concept of a score of 80 at Pebble Beach on a day when the wind is blowing 30 miles an hour is better than a score of 80 from the same course, same set of tees on a dead calm day. And this should recognize this. So let's look at a couple of examples. Weather would be very obvious. Wind would be obvious. How about course setup? So you have your biggest tournament of the year coming up this weekend. You let the rough grow a little bit longer. You double mowed the greens and rolled them. You put all the tees back. You selected all the toughest hole locations. Well, that could skew scores. Obviously, the course was playing more difficult than normal under those circumstances. The scores would reflect it. It'd see that not a whole lot of people played within their expected scoring range. A lot of people scored higher, and so the PCC would kick in. How about associate clubs? We've heard from a lot over the years that they book an event at a busy public golf course on a weekend, and they get there and all the tees have been shoved forward, and it's the most vanilla hole locations in the middle of the green everywhere. Why? They've got a full tee sheet, a couple hundred golfers. They're concerned about pace of play. They intuitively set up or instinctively set up the course a little bit easier to promote a better pace of play. Well, the scores that are submitted that day should reflect that. They should be lower than normal, because when we rate, we're rating for normal conditions, average conditions in the middle of the summer, basically. So it could recognize that and say something was going on, making the golf course play much easier today. It wasn't necessarily designed for this, but if we get back into a historic drought like we had in previous years, a course is not able to lay as much water on the fairways as they would like. Golfers are achieving far above average roll. The course is playing shorter. The scores are coming down. The PCC should be able to catch that. And one of my favorites, just winter play. We have a lot of golf courses that simply do not play to their ratings during the winter. And in all honesty, a lot of these golfers should suspend score posting during those winter months because we see handicaps get skewed. We see 15s moving up to 20 because the golf course is playing so much longer. You're not achieving very much roll. And then as the weather improves, as we move from spring to summer, their handicap marches back down to their natural position of 15. So we have a lot of courses that probably shouldn't be posting but do. And again, handicaps tend to go up region-wide for those who continue to play a lot of golf. Well, the PCC would recognize something was going on, skewing scores, making the course play much more difficult than normal, certainly not playing to normal summer conditions. They should recognize that, and maybe we don't see people go all the way from a 15 to a 20 because the PCC is being applied a lot during the winter months. Now, on a personal level, a selfish level, I'm really looking forward to the PCC because unofficially it could give us a report card on the accuracy of our ratings. We're going to have to wait till the summer, though, because we are rating for summer conditions. What are the green speeds you maintain in the summer? What is the rough severity like in the summer? So I'm really going to be interested to see how often the PCCs are kicking in at different golf courses during the summer months. And if we see that the course is consistently kicking in during the summer, scores too high, or scores too low, we're going to have to re-examine that rating. We're going to have to contact the club. Do we have your normal summer conditions listed properly? Do we have the right green speeds? Do we have the rough severity? We may need to alter the rating if we see it pinging a lot. And I wouldn't be surprised if in my lifetime they weaponize this feature that after collecting thousands upon thousands of scores for players of all different handicap ranges, they figure out a way to calculate a rating and slope rating based upon that. We're nowhere near there yet, but again, in my lifetime, it would not surprise me. So let's look at a little video on the playing conditions calculation.
Course ratings and slope ratings measure course difficulty under normal conditions. But as every golfer knows, not every day is normal. Factors such as weather and course setup can change the way a golf course plays. None of these things should affect the integrity of your handicap index. To ensure they don't, a playing conditions calculation is carried out automatically for each course each day, provided at least 8 eligible players have submitted acceptable scores. The PCC compares actual scores against expected scores. If scores submitted match expectations, no adjustment is made. But if the PCC shows players have performed significantly better or worse than expected, the calculation automatically adjusts score differentials accordingly. The result is, a higher score on a tough day may still count as a good score and may be used to calculate your updated handicap index, ensuring it continues to reflect your ability.
So I really like that graph showing the funnel, and again, there's an expectation of what sort of scores are going to be returned under normal conditions, and if things get skewed higher or lower, the PCC will kick in. Now, the expectation is it should only kick in maybe 15 to 20% of the time. A test was run in Chicago last year during the summer, and it only occurred 2% of the time. Well, that's not completely unexpected because we are rating your courses for summertime conditions. So again, I'm not going to worry a lot about this. We'll see how this works out. I'm certainly not going to overreact to a lot of PCC pinging in the winter months because personally I would expect it to occur a lot. We're really interested in the summertime when the majority of scores are posted because in theory those are the conditions that the rating is based upon. As I mentioned, we have something called an exceptional score reduction. It's very straightforward. It applies to any round of golf. If you tee it up and you score at least 7 strokes below your handicap, an automatic 1-stroke reduction is going to kick in. That's above and beyond the natural input of a really, really good score. So if all of a sudden you return a phenomenal score 8 strokes under your handicap, you can bet that tomorrow morning your handicap index would have been lower anyway as part of the best 8 of 20 calculation. But above and beyond that, you'd be reduced an additional stroke. And the way they do that is they apply a minus 1.0 to your 20 most recent differentials at that point. And that has the effect of lowering you an additional stroke above and beyond what the input of that low score would have been. And if you score more than 10 strokes below your handicap, a minus 2 adjustment will kick in. So we have a scoring record that kind of illustrates this. So there out of nowhere, the golfer recorded a score at least 7 strokes lower than their course, the handicap index they carried that day. So a minus 1 was applied to all the differentials, the 20 most recent differentials, which caused the index to come down 1 stroke above and beyond where it would have come down based upon the input of such a low score. And you can see that there is going to be a column that is going to be devoted to an ESR adjustment. I would expect it to be blank for almost everybody. These sorts of scores are only recorded a tiny fraction of the time. But let's get back to this playing record. You'll notice that all the scores then beyond the May 22nd score had no -1s applied until in September they recorded yet another exceptional score, and another -1 was applied, and it even had the impact of overlapping on a few of those scores. So that's how it's going to work. Again, your handicap index would have come down anyway based upon the input of a really good score, and then above and beyond that, a -1 would be applied. And here is a quick video on the exceptional score reduction process.
A great round of golf can be a one-off, but sometimes it demonstrates that a player can score significantly better than their current handicap index would suggest. The rules of handicapping include additional adjustments within the handicap calculation when a player submits a score at least 7 strokes below their handicap index at the time the round was played. This is an exceptional score and merits an additional adjustment of -1 to the updated handicap index, or -2 when the score is more than 10 strokes below. The application of this adjustment to all of the scores within the player's scoring record ensures that the exceptional score continues to be reflected within the player's handicap index for at least 20 scores. When the adjustment is considered excessive for a player, the handicap committee can override it, helping ensure the handicap index truly reflects a player's ability.
So as you can see, there's an immediate impact of a -1 adjustment, but then as the golfer posts additional scores, those -1s are not being applied to the newly entered differentials, and so some of the impact of that adjustment starts to dissipate. Let's look at our caps. Again, we have the concept of a low handicap index. Generally speaking, the system is not going to let you go more than 5 strokes higher than the low that you've achieved in the past 12 months. Again, which reinforces the idea that if a golfer accidentally posts a wrong score, and an especially low score, and that next morning is issued a much lower handicap index, you may need to get in there and reset this low index so that there aren't repercussions down the road. But we do have what's known as a soft cap and a hard cap. And basically, once you reach a point that's more than 3 strokes above your low index of the past year, the soft cap will suppress the upward movement of your handicap index by a factor of 50%. So basically, it's going to apply the brakes once you get to a point that's more than 3 strokes above your low index of the year, and it's only going to let your handicap index climb at 50% of the rate that it would if no cap existed. And then it's going to flat out stop you at the hard cap. It's flat out not going to let you get more than 5 strokes above your low index of the past year, unless there are exceptional circumstances where the handicap committee needs to intervene. Now, personally, I don't think this is going to happen a whole lot. I don't think we're going to see the wild fluctuations in handicaps that we have historically, in part because the PCC is going to be kicking in during the winter months. We're not going to see those 15s move all the way up to 20 because the golfers are playing so long in January and February. So I don't think we're going to see this as much as some people might fear because the PCC is going to be armed and ready. But let's look at a couple of examples here that are a little bit difficult to follow. I will tell you we're going to be forwarding you these slides in addition to putting the entire recording on our website. But here we have someone whose low index was a 10. Their current best 8 of 20 suggests they should be a 15.2. So what is the gap between their low and their current? It's 5.2 strokes. How much does 5.2 exceed the soft cap number of 3.0? Well, it does so by 2.2 strokes. We're not going to let you move up 2.2 strokes. We're going to cut that in half. Half of 2.2 would be 1.1, and we would find that instead of moving all the way up to the 15.2 that the 8 of 20 would suggest, the soft cap kicked in and is just going to issue a handicap of 14.1. So again, the scores would suggest 15.2, but because that was more than 3 strokes higher than their low index of the past year, the brakes were applied, and at a certain point, the increase in handicap was restricted to 50% of what the normal math would suggest, and a 14.1 was issued. Same situation, 10.0 is low, handicaps all the way up to 8 of 20 is all the way up to 17.4. That's a gap of 7.4 strokes, which exceeds the soft cap limit of 3 by 4.4 strokes. If we applied the brakes and curtailed that increase to 50% of that 4.4, that would be 2.2. You might think that they would be issued a 15.2. But in fact, the hard cap would kick in and say, nope, you don't get to budge more than 5 strokes above your low of the past 12 months, which was 10.0. So that's an example of the hard cap. So again, I don't expect to see this occur a whole lot, in part because of the PCC, but this is how it take place. And that is where this memory of the system is going to be pertinent. And again, we all kind of catch a break in year 1 of the World Handicap System because no attempt was made to calculate what your World Handicap System index would have been in January this year, February this year, etc. So we're all kind of starting out fresh as if we were our new golfers. Don't get me wrong, all your scores are going to come over and you're going to be issued a handicap on January 16th, but we're almost treating you as a brand new golfer where we entered all of your most recent scores in one sitting, and so there's no memory of a low index from 2019. So here's a little video on the caps.
The handicap index should always reflect your demonstrated
We're
ability.
almost there.
But even the best players can have a series of bad scores which don't truly reflect their underlying ability. To combat this, there are automatic caps in the handicap formula, ensuring your handicap index won't rise too quickly due to a short run of poor form. Your lowest handicap index within the 12 months prior to your last score acts as a baseline. When your new handicap index calculates at more than 3 strokes higher than your low handicap index, a soft cap applies and reduces the value of any increase over 3.0 by 50%. As a second safeguard, there's a hard cap, limiting any upward movement in your index to a maximum of 5 strokes above your low handicap index. Both caps apply automatically, with no need to carry out calculations yourself. You can play your round confident that whatever happens on the course, your updated handicap index will continue to reflect your ability.
So again, we're not going to see the wild swings in handicaps that we do under the current system because there's going to be some limitations in how far you can stray above your low index mark of the past 12 months. Again, we've already mentioned there are going to be daily revisions of the handicap. Again, the button's going to be pushed at midnight our time. So the first step is to figure out the PCC for every single golf course in actually across the world. And then the handicap index will be updated. Now, in regards to the e-revisions that we send on the 1st and 15th, the 1st and 15th really don't carry any more or any less significance than the handicap indexes. You'd be issued on the 2nd or the 16th or any other date. But we're going to continue to issue the e-revisions to you with content on the 1st and the 15th. We're not going to bombard you, though. If you happen to play a couple hundred rounds a year, we're not going to bombard you with an e-revision and content every single morning or the day after every round you posted. So for those who play the most golf that are most interested in those daily handicaps, again, the kiosks, score posting kiosks at golf courses will have your latest handicap, as will the app. You'll want to check it out, see what your new handicap index is before you tee it up that day. Down the road, perhaps when we get to April, we still have some decisions to make. We may or may not decide we're going to send out a very minimal email to you the day after you post it around, just with a link saying, if you want to look up your current handicap index, here it is. We haven't made a final decision on that, but certainly we don't want to bombard you with content day after day. As far as our app is concerned, we are switching to a new one. The good news, though, is that you can do an update or a download from the existing one to the new one. If you've set up your phone to automatically install new updates, it will do so in very early January, and you'll be off and running, and it'll carry over any partners that you've set up. So if you play with the same and the same foursome every single day, and you've previously loaded the other 3 people you play with on a regular basis, those will come over. If you haven't set it up for automatic download, you probably get a message saying one is available that you have to go out and retrieve. Or if you don't have an app, and that's the direction that people are heading, you're going to, at the beginning of the year, you're going to want to seek out the My NCGA app to download so that you can post scores, retrieve your new handicaps, calculate your course handicaps, compare your course handicaps with those you play on a regular basis. Okay, we've had a few more questions come in that we'll try to answer.
Can you address preferred lies?
Preferred lies, yes, the system is proactive. Preferred lies are recognized under the rules of golf. So the system still says that you post your scores when preferred lies are in play. We get the argument that, well, preferred lies are used during the winter, that causes my scores to go down. Well, overall, we see handicaps go up in the winter. So I think the effects of the courses playing longer by receiving less roll during the winter months kind of exceeds the benefits that you get from preferred lies, because certainly historically scores go up, handicaps go up at that time. So yes, you would continue posting. If you're gonna use preferred lies though as a crutch and use them throughout these summer months as well, when the courses don't require it, then you're only hurting yourself and you're hurting your handicap index if you ever play in a competition, for example, where you're required to play the ball down.
What about competitions between men and women? Will the competition adjustments still be enforced?
Well, it's a very good question. If the par is the same from the tees the men are employing and the women are employing, again, the new course handicap tables will have done all the heavy lifting for you and no adjustment is necessary. Now, especially older golf courses where the women's tees are proportionately longer than the men's tees, it's not uncommon to find a difference in par between the men and the women. Men might be par 72, women par 73 or 74. If the par is different, we need to make an adjustment based upon the difference in par. But if the par is the same, again, the new course handicap tables will do all the work for you, and the numbers that are derived from those tables will be the final numbers that they play with. And before we get to this question, yes, Golf Genius is being fully updated based upon the new provisions of the World Handicap System. So as we enter 2020, the Golf Genius products, USGA TM, will be fully compatible with the World Handicap System. You won't see any more references to Section 3-5, the adjustment based on the difference in ratings, because that no longer exists. You'll be able to pull in the current handicap indexes or handicap indexes for whatever day you choose.
So for team match play, some courses have match play handicap holes, and then they also have different handicap holes for stroke play.
We'll be covering stroke index in another section that has to do with appendices, so I'm going to hold off on that one because we'll be covering that.
Okay, last one here for now. Most likely score. If the player picks up on a hole for match play purposes or pace of play, with the player puts down a gross double bogey, is that the same if the holes are not played due to darkness?
No, two completely different concepts. And what you would do, if you pick up on a hole, you record your most likely score, not necessarily net double bogey. You wouldn't want to assume, if you knocked it within a couple of feet of the hole, but you picked up because, your partner sank a birdie putt and there's no need for you to putt out or whatever the circumstances are, you wouldn't want to assume that you would 4 or 5 putt from that position. So you wouldn't want to assume the worst. Instead, you award yourself your most likely score, that is, in your mind, the score you would have achieved the majority of the time if you hold out from the position that you actually picked up. And that is completely different than a net par. That's for an unplayed hole where we award ourselves a par plus any handicap strokes we're entitled to. So let's move on. Handicap committee responsibilities. Well, technically, the World Handicap System is suggesting that you have a sit down with each and every golfer at your club at least once a year to review their handicap record. That's certainly more RNA derived than USGA derived. We don't expect here in America people to do that, but either at the discretion of the golfer or the discretion of the handicap committee, from time to time it may be necessary to perform a handicap review. That could be someone coming back from an injury or illness that needs some relief in their handicap, or it could be the handicap committee taking a golfer to task because they're not posting all their scores, or they're outperforming their handicap with tremendous regularity and by large margins in your competitions. So a number of reports are going to be created that would allow a club to perform a deep dive. We've also been given assurances from GIN that better diagnostic tools are going to be developed that we can put in your hands to perform these deep dives. Again, a comparison of competition scores versus non-competition scores. Personally, I would like to see these things not be passive. Have these systems set up where the handicap committee might be alerted about a golfer. Hey, you should look at this golfer's record, because if you compare competition scores and non-competition scores, you can see a huge difference, and perhaps the competition scores are steering you towards what the correct handicap index should be. For those clubs who do perform deep dives at this point in time, they often call us and say, well, where's the formula for how we lower someone's handicap based upon their good scores? And there is no such formula. Each club has to exercise their own best judgment. I'm hoping that we can develop some tools that we can put in your hands that will maybe point you in the direction, maybe suggest a number to adjust them to. So I'm hoping to get on that committee that's going to develop those tools, because I have a lot of strong opinions based upon input that I've gotten from handicap chairmen over the years of what we want to see. But there will be some reports that will help you, and eventually there'll be some features that will assist you. Here are some examples of the type of things that could be reviewed with a golfer. To me, the most important is the bottom right, comparison of average score differentials between competition and casual rounds. So again, still a need to apply the C, even though a C score, a competition score, is not going to carry any more or any less weight than any other round posted. You still have the ability to adjust handicaps. A recommendation is you should do so at least, should be at least a stroke, and that only under exceptional circumstances should you ever consider raising someone more than 5 strokes above their low mark of the past 12 months. You have the ability to modify someone's handicap just like you do right now, freeze it, basically say we're going to make you play to this handicap index of 12 for the next 6 months. Or there's another way that you can do it. You can actually reset the handicap differentials of the most 20 level you're trying to place them at. So let's look at a knee replacement or something like that. They were a 10, they had their knee replaced, their first few scores, they're playing like a 20. Well, certainly you don't want to raise their handicap all the way to the 20. I think they went into the surgery with the expectation that they're going to get better, and you would expect that the first few scores back would probably be their worst. So, you know, currently I'd probably recommend to someone, maybe you meet them halfway and maybe you assign a 15 to them. So a club could go in and say, we're going to modify you to a 15 for the next couple of months, but then they have to do a lot of monitoring of each score that the person posts. And is that 15 appropriate? What is the speed at which they're recovering and their scores are returning to the form that they used to carry or exceeding the form they used to carry? So another way you could adjust them would be, hey, I'm going to take your 20 most recent differentials and I'm going to increase them by 5 strokes. And at least immediately that's going to raise your handicap index by 5. But then as you post scores, some of those impacted differentials are falling off the record. The action is dissipating a little bit as new scores are entered, but hopefully that the scores that are going in are showing the improvement as the golfer got used to this knee replacement. And it might time it very well. So by the time all the scores with the +5 differentials have been removed, they've improved, and the normal 8 out of 20 calculation has got them at the right level. So I think when we have an injury illness situation, that may be a very good way to go. Increasing the differentials of the 20 most scores to occur, the scores +5 differentials are falling off, should time everything very well and not require you to monitor the situation as much or constantly change this modified number as they start to turn the corner and improve. We also have the concept of a penalty score, same as right now. It would be equal to their lowest differential among their 20 most recent rounds. So basically a duplication of the best round among the 20 most recent has the impact of lowering their handicap. And whether they had a valid reason, like they became violently ill and they weren't able to post their score, the weather turned on them very quickly, PG&E turned off electricity, so the kiosk was not available, or an invalid reason, it's just, hey, they shot a good score and they don't want to post that because they don't want to see their handicap come down. In both scenarios, if you can find out what score they shot by speaking to others who are in the same group, A, you want to post that score in order to set the record right, and then B, if they were not posting for with bad intentions, trying to manipulate their handicap, you'd want to also zing them with a penalty score. So this is normally the first stage of penalty actions when you have a problem golfer. More often than not, when people say, hey, this person's handicap is way off, too high, they're able to play. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you're able to hear this or not, but we've temporarily lost our connection, so we're going to try to retrieve that. So just bear with us for a second. Again, apologies. I think we're back up and running. But there is a worst case scenario if you dealt with this person time after time and taken penalty actions and they're still not complying. You have the authority to withdraw their handicap, and good luck trying to play in one of your tournaments or an outside tournament with the letters WH instead of numbers. So we wouldn't expect you to run into this situation very often, but you do have the ability to do this in a worst case scenario. The next slide or two is talking about reinstating a handicap that has been withdrawn, but I think what's more likely to occur is you have a golfer who used to be a member, they dropped for a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years because of family or work, and now they're coming back. We still have that handicap record available, and you question, do I just bring them back based upon these scores that are 3 or 4 years old? Do I have them start over, remove all those scores, and once they've posted 3, go ahead, 54 holes, be issued a handicap? Do I watch their first few scores that they post, see how that stacks up with these scores that are years old, and adjust accordingly? And the answers could be yes, yes, and yes. So I think most clubs probably reinstate them based upon the scores that are a few years old, probably monitor the first few scores that they post on their comeback to see if they're comparable to the old scores, and adjust accordingly. Okay, some committee responsibilities. This is very, very important. You're going to have to give a lot of consideration to this. Certainly, you need to define the terms of your competitions, what the maximum handicap limit might be. We've had some women in particular say, well, the handicap limit has always been 40.4, and now you're going up to 54.0. We're not 100% comfortable with that. Well, you could set a maximum handicap limit of 40.4 for your competitions and just keep it the way it's been going, but you're going to want to spell that out in advance. So again, you can do some sort of handicap limit. You can reserve the right to adjust their playing handicap. So if you have a history with this golfer, you can say, hey, we're going to adjust you based upon some of the past success you've had. We certainly do that for our own NCGA championships. We track scores from the last 3 years in our NCGA net events. And each year, a letter goes out to a number of people saying, we're going to require you to play to our number or your current handicap index, whichever is lower for the following season. One of the things you really have to wrap your head around, though, is which day's handicaps do you want to use for your competitions? Again, handicaps are going to be updated daily. The last thing in the world you want to do is go to all this work of setting up a tournament, creating your flights, generating your scorecards, dotting the handicap stroke holes where they fall, creating beautiful scoreboards, and have someone come up and say, hey, I played yesterday, my handicap change all of this. You need to spell out which day's handicaps you're going to use. We've been given assurances from Gin and Golf Genius that if you specify a date, you can retrieve handicaps for that particular date. So today is the 18th. If I had a competition this weekend and I had decided I'm just setting up the tournament now and I wanted handicaps from the 15th, you would be able to pull those handicaps from the date that you want. But that's really going to be a big issue. Again, you're going to have to get a lot of thought. I would expect the NCGA to continue to use handicaps from the 1st and 15th. That's what people are used to. We'll probably do that going forward. You really want to strike a balance between a desire to use as current handicaps as possible versus the reality of how long it takes to set up a tournament. For many of you, it's a volunteer position, setting up all these tournaments, and you don't want to put them under any more undue pressure. So if we had a competition, we did have a championship here at NCGA this Monday and Tuesday, the 16th and 17th. I'm pretty sure that we said, hey, we're not using handicaps from December 15th. We're going to use December 1st. Why? We didn't want to make a staff person come in Sunday or get in here at 4 a.m. on Monday morning, retrieve the new handicaps, redo all the flights, redo the scorecards, redo the scoreboards. So again, you're going to need to figure out which days handicaps do you want to use without putting undue pressure on the people who set up your tournaments. I suspect we'll continue to use 1st, 15th. Maybe eventually that we decide, hey, we'll use handicaps from 1 week prior to the first round of the competition. You're going to have to do what works best for your club, but make sure you give this thought and you announce your decisions in advance. We're also going to find one new consideration of the World Handicap System. If you had a 54-hole competition this year, there's a good chance you just wait until the 3rd round is over and then push the button and post the scores for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round at that time. Now, the incentive is going to be once round 1 has been completed, to post the round 1 scores prior to midnight of the day you played.
Why? So that the PCC can kick in. We're probably more interested in those competition scores and the quality of those scores than we are the non-competition scores that are being returned that day. So the only way you can include your scores in the PCC calculation that evening is if after round one has been complete, that evening before midnight, you push the button to post the round one scores, do the same on the evening of round two, do the same on the evening of round three. Now, we would never recommend that you change your handicaps each day, that it's a 36-hole competition, and after round one and after you post, that you go ahead and apply the new handicaps to round two. That's just really not practical, may not be feasible. Again, putting a lot of pressure on the people who run your tournaments. So we would recommend that you continue to use whichever day's handicaps you specified for that duration of that 2 or 3 day tournament. I made reference to this earlier, handicap allowances. They've changed under the World Handicap System based upon the combined research of the RNA and the USGA. There is one error on this. This slide was produced by the USGA a couple of months ago, and one last minute change was made. If you look to the left, match play, the second one down, a 4-ball, like we saw last week at the President's Cup, 2 against 2, each player playing their own ball. The recommendation now is going to be 90%. At present, it's 100% for that format. You spin off the low of the group at present, who then plays at scratch, and everybody else plays with what's left over. Here, you would first apply 90% to the course handicaps that came off the table, and then spin off the low who plays at scratch. If we look at the upper right-hand corner stroke play, we're going to find for a straightforward gross net competition, the recommendation now is 95% of the handicap, not 100%. Now, that's assuming you have a mid-size field or above, defined as 30 players or more. If you had fewer than 30 players in the competition, gross net, the recommendation would still be to apply 100% to the handicap. So if you had a 100-player field, but you've broken it into 4 flights of 25 each, as long as those people within the flights are only competing against their fellow flight players and there is no overall low net for the entire field, you could go ahead and use 100%. But if there is an overall low net for the field, you would want to apply the 95%. 4-ball stroke play has changed. Right now it's 90% for men, 95% for women. And also the stipulation that if you have a team, 2 partners that have a very wide gap in their handicaps, more than 8 strokes, but they're penalized an additional 10%. That all goes away. It's 85%. No concern about the gap between the partners' handicaps, and it's 85% for men and women alike. Same with best 2 net of 4. That's a format we use for our zone championship and our associate club championship. That's moved to 85%. And I would also point out the scramble. They've put a little research into it, and they've altered this for a 4-player team. The recommendation is now 25% of the A player, 20 of the B, 15 of the C, 10% of the D. So if you have a competition coming up, again, we're not going to be able to get this manual in your hands for another month or so. We do have the online version in the web page that we've devoted to the World Handicap System. You can find these allowance recommendations in there. If you have some early tournaments in January, some of the formats listed here, and you want to employ the new recommendations. Let's watch kind of a nice little summary here. We have a couple more topics to cover, but a nice little summary.
What will the World Handicap System mean for you, the player? It all starts with a measure of your golfing ability, calculated the same way for every player around the world. A handicap index that you can take with you anywhere and use at whatever course you're playing. Before your round, decide which teams you're going to play from, which can be different for each member of your group. Every set of teams will have a course and slope rating based on course difficulty. These will normally be available on a lookup chart near the first tee or through an app. Next, decide the format of play. This will determine the handicap allowance you will be given. Together, the course rating, slope rating, and handicap allowance convert your handicap index into a playing handicap, representing the number of strokes you'll receive from the round, providing you the best opportunity of doing well, whoever you're playing. Some formats of play aren't suitable for submitting a score for handicap purposes.
If you're playing around and would like to submit your score, you may need to check the procedures before you play. If you're ever in doubt about the rules and procedures relating to handicapping, check with the club where you're playing. During the round itself, go out and play, enjoying the game as you've always would. Knowing how many strokes you receive for the round also lets you know the maximum number of strokes that you'll receive on each hole. While one bad hole might mean you don't win the competition, you can still submit an acceptable score for handicap purposes. If the format of play allows, you should pick up when you reach your maximum hole score, keeping your game and the game of everyone else on the course moving along. At the end of your round, add up your score, including any penalty strokes and any applicable adjustments for holes not played or where you didn't hole out. When your score is ready, make sure it's verified as required, then simply submit your score in accordance with club policy. By submitting your score as soon as possible, you ensure all necessary calculations, adjustments, and safeguards can be applied, giving you an accurate, up-to-date handicap index ready for the next day or soon after. The more scores you submit, the more accurately your handicap index will reflect your ability. Up-to-date, easy to understand, and adaptable. The World Handicap System lets you play the way you always have, as well as giving you a handicap index that will travel anywhere you decide to play.
Okay, a few miscellaneous items. Under the current handicap system, if someone is a member of 2 or more clubs, it is possible for them to carry 2 different handicap indexes, even though they're tied to the same handicap record. Why? One club might choose to modify a handicap while the other doesn't. Or under the current system, if someone had a T-score reduction in place, one might relieve them of that reduction while the other didn't. Well, the World Handicap System only wants you to have one handicap index. So to combat that problem, when we have multiple clubs, one of those clubs is going to be designated as the, quote, home club, and they're going to be the final authority regarding the resting place of the handicap. Now, the second club, I don't want to call them secondary, I refer to them as a supporting club. They can still have a say in the handicap, it's just that the final authority would be the home club. So if someone is a member of 2 clubs and your club is designated as a home club, we want you to keep an open mind, open to input based upon the experience that the other club has had with this particular golfer. And if you are the supporting club, we want you to be vocal in reaching out to the home club. You can do that by contacting the NCGA, and we can get the 2 clubs talking to each other in terms of your experience. Now, as we cross over into January, what are we going to do? How are we going to designate home clubs? We don't have any receptacle to put a check mark in the current system to say this is who we want to be the home club. So by default, if someone is a member of what we call a regular club, a green grass club, and an associate club, by default, they're going to be placed in the green grass club. If someone is a member of 2 green grass clubs, an examination is going to be performed in terms of which course they post more scores at, and under those circumstances, the course where they post the most at would be deemed the home club. These designations can be changed after the fact. For example, I'm still a member of a green grass club in my home state of Washington, and I'm a member of the Association Employee Club here at the NCGA. It's almost certainly going to place me in the Washington Club, and I'm going to change that designation to my NCGA club. So by default, everyone is going to be, for those who are multi-members, it's going to assign the home club to one of those 2. If that's not the one that the golfer wants, you can contact us and we can change that. As we referenced earlier, stroke index is the new term for the ranking of the stroke holes, and the recommendation is changing. To a pretty large degree. Historically, the number has been a match play inspired number. It was trying to tell you not necessarily the most difficult holes on the course, but the holes where a high handicapper most needs a stroke from a low in a match, where they most need a stroke to secure a half. So that's why we went odd even. If you're giving me 6 strokes, it's important that 3 occur on the front and the back, and odd even achieves that, and we're going to see odd even carries over to the World Handicap System. But that's why the system presently always said avoid assigning a number 2 ranking to the 18th hole in your golf course, because if you think about it, most matches are over before the 18th hole is even reached. So you would artificially want to bump down that rating and award the number 2 ranking to another hole. That's why we avoid the number 1 ranking to the first hole in a golf course. In the event of sudden death playoff and match play, that's awarding the stroke too soon. Well, we're moving away from match play. Most people thought the ranking was intended to tell you the most difficult holes in relationship to par. And moving forward, that is in fact what they're going to be. That's what the recommendation is going to be. Just look at the raw difficulty of the hole versus par and assign accordingly. But since this is now going to be a stroke play inspired number or stroke play derived number that at the same time is going to be used for match play, some considerations need to be made regarding match play. So they've come up with this triad system where you break down each 9 into 3-hole triads, and that you try to assign the number 1 stroke hole on each 9 in those middle 3 holes, 4, 5, 6, 13, 14, 15, to ensure that in a match that stroke gets to be used. And then once you've achieved that you try to award the second ranked hole on each 9 in either the first or the third triad, the third stroke hole on each 9 in the opposite first or third triad, so that you're spreading out the strokes throughout the 9. Some other considerations would be to try to avoid back-to-back really high-ranked holes like 1 and 3 or 1 and 5 or 3 and 5, if at all possible. So again, trying to find the number 1 stroke hole on each 9 in the middle 3 holes, and then the number 3 and 5 ranked holes in the first or third triad. Now, I've already worked on a few of these, and at some courses it just doesn't cooperate. I had one course where their middle 3 holes were 2 par 3s and the easiest par 4 in the course. Under those circumstances, they say, well, you can move 1 hole forward or 1 hole back, but we're really trying to avoid the number 1 stroke hole in the first couple or last couple of holes on each 9. Now, to assist you in this, you can contact us and we can generate a report based upon our findings and our course rating visits. I really need to emphasize that the report that we would generate are not based upon real scores that real golfers are returning, and to me that's always going to be the best way to determine the raw difficulty of your holes versus par. But we can generate a report for you based upon our findings for a scratch golfer and a bogey golfer, and how each of those holes in theory would rank in terms of raw difficulty, and then take into consideration the middle triads, the avoiding number 2 stroke hole, especially to the 18th hole, things like that. So we're happy to generate that report to you, but I still feel that real scores by real golfers are going to be the way to go. If in recent years you did perform an evaluation, you still have access to that hole-by-hole data, you can probably use it. If you came up with a scoring average for a low handicap group and a high handicap group, you can take those scoring averages, add them together, subtract 2 times par, and that's going to tell you it's a raw difficulty. So really, I would not recommend a club that just for the sake of change, they go in and they try to redo all these numbers right now, especially if you have a large inventory of scorecards in your possession right now. But the next time you are going to order a bunch of scorecards in bulk, that you consider reviewing the stroke hole rankings, the stroke index, because of this fairly big change in terms of moving to a stroke play perspective and away from a match play perspective. As I indicated earlier, the NCGA is responsible for adjudicating par, not the golf courses. For years, we've sent reports telling them, hey, this hole just doesn't quite cut it as a par 5 for men from these shorter tees. And again, courses have found it inconvenient to list those on the card. Well, as we found, par is a lot more significant in the World Handicap System. We have net par, we have we have net double bogey, which is based upon an accurate par. And we have these slope tables that are considering the difference between course rating and par in them. So we got to call it like it is. And again, that 515 hole from blue and 485 from white and 430 from gold, that's really a par 5, par 4 under ordinary circumstances, not a 555. Even if the clientele that plays those gold tees tend to be in their 70s and tend to be 20 plus again, we have to think in terms of for those tees. It easily, as clearly defined as before, they indicate there is some overlappage of these standards. Historically, we've always said if it's even close, tie goes to the golf course. So the old standard for a par 5 for men was 471, and if that hole was 460-ish, but a little uphill near the end, or you had to carry a bunker to reach it, we go, okay, tie goes to the golf course, we'll issue them their par 5. But when it's clear cut that that would be a 2-shot hole for scratch, we do need to call it a par 4. On the women's side, historically, we've seen, or in some cases, seen a 375-yard hole. And while none of the women at this club can reach that in 2, ergo, that is a par 5. Sorry if a scratch player were playing those tees at a standard 375-yard hole, the scratch would easily be able to reach that in 2. So again, we're going to try to get you those course handicap tables over the course of the next couple of weeks that are going to reflect the difference between course rating and par in them. Temporary ratings, there is going to continue to be a chart that if just for a couple of days you had a couple of back tees that you were taking out of play and you're temporarily playing that set of tees 150 yards shorter, there's a table that you can apply that 150 yards to, and it would instruct you how much to pull down the normal rating, and you could apply that. We're going to find that if the difference is less than 100 yards, don't bother with it. The current rating is fine. The PCC might pick up that that something was going on. If it's a permanent change, though, you need to notify us. We've seen a little proliferation, 4,500 yards of tees, that grandkids. If you want to install those, we have to come out and measure those. It's not going to require a full rating team visit, however, and same with combo tees. We've seen an explosion of combo tee requests. Does not require a full rating team to come out and visit your golf course. For a combo tee, we're just going to mix and match. So we would just need an email saying, we want a white gold combo, and on holes 1 and 2, we want to use the white tee, 3, we want to use gold, 4, we want to use white, etc. And we can put that together for you. For these family tees, we have all the green side obstacle findings from our most recent visit, and a combination of Google Earth and our old records. We can piece together a accurate rating for you. So again, anytime you build new tees, you need to contact us. And again, for combo tees, family tees, once we've measured them, it doesn't require a full team. And lastly, just want to go over a couple of educational concerns. Again, the concept of handicap certification is being reintroduced by the World Handicap System. So between now and June 30th of 2020, a representative from your club, ideally someone on your club roster, is going to need to complete a USGA seminar and pass an exam that the USGA offers in order for your club to be able to issue handicaps beyond next June. So the latest information we have from the USGA, they had been telling us it would be available by year's end. Now they're telling us mid to late January. As soon as it becomes available, we'll send notification out to clubs so that you can online go into this seminar. We would expect you would not have to take it in one sitting, that you can come and go as you like, but ultimately you pass a little quiz, and then that clears the way for your club to be able to issue handicaps beyond June of 2020. So there's not going to be any tremendous time pressure on you. You're going to have months and months to complete it. But again, as soon as we get word of that, we'll get that notification to you, and then we'll monitor who's doing it, who has completed the seminar, achieved the passing score. As we get closer to June, though, you'll see some urgency applied to the email reminders that we're sending you, because the last thing in the world we want to do is pull the plug on your handicaps and issue an NH for no handicap to all your members come July 1st.
We do have a couple of questions come in, Jim. If the course has not adjusted hole par, is there a way for golfers to see NCGA ratings?
Well, you can always view NCGA ratings at our website. If you simulate a score posting and bring up the golf course name and the various tees, you'll see the ratings. I suspect moving forward that may include the par also, that it would indicate that. I haven't seen that for certain. Have you seen that, Martin? That when we perform a handicap lookup, that it's going to show the par. Certainly the course handicaps are going to indicate, whereas the back tees are rated 72, it might say gold or red, 70 or 69. And I think if you, even though the scorecard might say par 5 for this hole from all 4 sets of tees, or doesn't differentiate for men between the blue tees and the red tees, I think the holes would stick out. Well, if the par's 3 lower, here are the 3 par 5s that really stick out, that they're drastically shorter than blue. Those must be the ones that have that whose correct par would be 4. Eventually, we'll be able to offer hole-by-hole score posting via the app, via the kiosk, but we still have to collect the stroke hole rankings for every golf course from every set of tees for both genders and enter that. We were not expecting to have to do that. We thought there'd be a means for a club to go in and record that information so that everybody could share it, but we just found out very recently that that's not the case. We do have probably your most recent scorecard from our most recent visit, which may have been 2, 3, 4 years ago, but that card may have been updated. And a lot of times when we go to websites and we see scorecards, those are not current either. So we're going to have to try to retrieve that information.
Along that same line, Jim, is there an expectation that courses will have updated their stroke index before the end of 2020? For the net double bogey, is it possible that the scorecard and WHS stroke index may be different?
Again, if a club just invested in 3 years worth of scorecards, I think it would be silly to just throw them all out at some point next year. That's quite an investment, and you don't want to throw away scorecards. If your stroke rankings are doing the trick right now, again, this is just a recommendation. It's not mandatory in terms of the ranking of your stroke holes. So if they're doing the trick and they meet some of the recommendations in terms of the middle holes being the top ranked hole in each 9, I see no reason to change them. But I would just say the next normal time the club would be considering placing a huge order of scorecards, that would be the best time to take another look at the stroke hole rankings, perhaps request that report from the NCGA that taps into the course rating data that we've collected.
All right, last question is in regards to education. It's a 2-part question. If a person is a member of more than one club and goes through the handicap certification, will that apply to every club? And when will the quiz be available to take?
Well, as I already mentioned, the latest word we've had is middle of January, that the seminar and the quiz is going to be available from the USGA. If someone is a member of multiple clubs, yeah, that can satisfy the requirement for multiple clubs. It doesn't have to be the handicap chairman that does it. Obviously makes sense that the handicap chairman would reinforce their understanding of the system by completing the seminar and completing the quiz, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that person. If someone is a handicap chairman for 2 clubs, their taking it does satisfy the requirement for both. So now we're going to turn it over to Martin. Martin's presentation, again, we're sorry we ran over with a few technical problems, but we're expecting a 20 to 25-minute presentation on the new GIN administrative portal.
Give me just 1 minute to switch the slides and we'll get started here promptly.